Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Club of Florida's 588th meeting in our continuing Distinguished Speaker Series. My name is Chris Emanuel, and I have the honor of being the club's president this year, and it's my pleasure to call this meeting to order. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. If you would set anything that buzzes or beeps to silence, that would be great. And we'd like to note that we have members joining us on a live stream, so there's a camera up here as well. That's especially important during the question and answer when we're asking questions, if you would do it into the microphone so our fellow members at home and in their offices can hear. And at this time, I'd like to invite everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by Phil Goodman, our guest speaker. He's the chairman of the Florida Keys Mosquito Control District and the Florida Mosquito Control Association Board, or serves as an association board member. He's a native North Carolinian, and he's lived in Florida for the past 35 years. And in a moment, he'll be more formally introduced. For our upcoming programs, on April 24th, please set your calendars. We have Scott McPherson, and that will be at the FSU Alumni Hall. And then on May 6th, we'll have the chair of the Atlanta Fed Reserve, Gregory Hale. We're excited about both of those. Be on the lookout. Both invitations will be coming to your email shortly. And please RSVP on our website as normal. At this time, I'd like to recognize our trustee members. As most people know, our trustees give an additional financial contribution to the club, allows us to have trustee events, membership events, things like that. If you're a trustee, please stand. And as is our club tradition, I'd love to go around the room and introduce any guests that we have here. We're going to start with my left, your right.
I'd just like to introduce my guest today. His name is Chadwick Leonard. He's with the Thousand Friends of Florida. He's an advocacy director there.
Welcome. Back here.
Mark Jubilee here today. His wife is at the head table there. Ironically, when I invited him, she didn't realize she was going to be there. They're talking to becoming a member.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay.
I'd like to introduce Lance Noah. Y'all know him. He, among many other businesses, he owns a company called Mosquito. So we may have some tough questions.
Any guests over here? Any guests in the back? Well, welcome to our guests, and thank you for those considering membership and those that have already committed to the crowd full of people here. It's now my pleasure to introduce the head table. I'm going to start with my left, your right, with Larry Sellers. Larry Sellers is a partner in Holland & Knight's Tallahassee office. He practices administrative and government law with concentration in environmental and land use matters. He is also a season ticket holder of the University of Florida's basketball team. That's doing pretty well, so congratulate him on that as well. Next, we have Emily Zubley. She is the executive director of the Florida Municipal Electric Association. FMEA represents the unified interests of all of Florida's 33 public power companies, including quite a few in the ballpark. We're thrilled to have her here. I'm going to skip over our speaker for a moment and go to Alia Faraj Johnson. She's the president and CEO of Alia Strategic Group. ASG helps businesses and organizations advance their priorities and achieve their goals by providing public affairs, crisis communications, and media relations services. She also serves on the Economic Club of Florida board. And then we're also joined by Chris Lyon, who's the executive shareholder of Lewis Longman Walker, and he's our sponsor today. Mr. Lyon's practice focuses on representing his clients' interests before the Florida legislature, the governor and cabinet, and also agency personnel. He represents statewide associations, local governments, and corporations with interests in the field of healthcare, technology, economic development, transportation, environmental, and land use. And we're especially thankful for the firm and their support of the Economic Club for today's lunch presentation. And with that, it's my pleasure to invite Chris to come up and introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you all for having us today. So he already sort of introduced who I am. I am an attorney, but my practice is lobbying. I'm with the firm of Lewis, Longman, Walker. We had the reserved table today, and we have two guests at our table that didn't get introduced. I'll do that now. We have Michelle Rodriguez. She's a young associate, just joined our firm in the Tallahassee office back in August. And Karen Crawford. The reason I'm here today is one of my legislative clients is the Florida Mosquito Control Association, of which Phil's organization is a member. Karen serves as the Florida Mosquito Control Association's executive director. She's here in town. She's local. Her and her husband have managed associations for years. So there's my little introduction for them. So I've had the privilege of representing the Florida Mosquito Control Association for going on 25 years. That representation of that organization has put me at the intersection of public health, environmental stewardship, and economic growth, which is the point of having Mr. Goodman here today to give his discussion. And Phil brings a remarkable combination of scientific expertise, business leadership, and public service. A graduate of North Carolina State University with a degree in chemistry. He also holds an MBA from the University of North Carolina. I think they play basketball today, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Yes, they do. They do. They do. Over his 40-year career in the global chemical industry, he co-founded BOMA Philatex, Inc., which became a world leader in specialty chemicals, conducting business in over 100 countries. After successfully leading the company to an acquisition in 2006, he retired to the Florida Keys. We're all jealous. But his work in public service was just beginning. In 2011, Governor Rick Scott appointed him to the Florida Keys Mosquito Control District Board of Commissioners, where he has since been reelected 3 times and now serves as chairman. He is also a board director of the Florida Mosquito Control Association and a registered parliamentarian. So let's not get out of order here today, Mr. Chair. Ensuring that Florida's mosquito control policies are science-based, innovative, and strategically governed. Today, Phil will take us through Florida's 100-year history of mosquito control, highlighting how this essential work has protected public health, fueled economic growth, and positioned Florida as a global leader in disease prevention. He will explore the rising threat of mosquito-borne illnesses, groundbreaking scientific advancements, and bold, forward-thinking strategies, such as the release of genetically modified mosquitoes to combat disease-carrying species. Just this past week, the Florida Mosquito Control Association was in Tallahassee advocating for the industry, meeting with state leaders and sharing valuable insights on the vital role mosquito control plays in protecting Florida's residents, businesses, and economy. Under Chair Goodman's leadership, the Keys Mosquito Control District worked closely with the local community to address the threat of disease-carrying mosquitoes. In fact, Monroe County voters overwhelmingly approved the use of genetically modified mosquitoes, a groundbreaking, science-driven solution designed to curb the spread of dangerous disease while safeguarding public health. With that, I'll stop here and welcome Chair Phil Goodman to the podium to tell us all about the world's deadliest animal and Florida's innovative fight against it. Please join me in welcoming Chairman Phil Goodman.
Thank you very much, Chris, for that introduction, and thank you and your firm for all you do for mosquito control and for the FMCA in Florida. It's a very valuable service. And thank you, Economics Club of Florida, for the invitation to be here today. It's an honor for me to speak to this esteemed group about mosquito control and the role that mosquito control plays in the economy of Florida and in public health, because it's a topic that not many people can connect the dots, because not many people are here that really remember how bad mosquitoes used to be in this state. With all the new residents that we have in this state, Very few people here remember when we had yellow fever and dengue fever and malaria, widespread epidemics all over the state. And when you couldn't go outside at night because you were attacked by hordes of mosquitoes, and when our seaside communities were closed in the summertime. Life was pretty difficult then in Florida, and the main reason was mosquitoes, or a really big reason was mosquitoes. Today, we are a year-round playground, and in part due to the increased mosquito control that we have and the tremendous amount of technology that has come about over the last years to make this happen. Mosquito control, we're always been a behind-the-scenes organization, and we're okay with that. But it's important that groups like this and leaders in our community and our businesses and government understand what we do and why, and understand the importance of mosquito control. Mosquito control in Florida has a very important story to tell and its relation to the economy. And it's my honor to be here today to tell it. And I've got some slides that I'll go through. But I guess the way to start is, how bad is this deadliest animal that lives in Florida? Well, there were about 1 million people died last year in the world for mosquito-borne diseases. And that number has been decreasing for a number of years. Back in the early to mid 1900s, as many as maybe 16 million people died in the world every year from malaria alone, and hundreds of those in Florida. But today it's a lot better. We have worldwide about 3,500 different species of mosquitoes. But of all those 3,500, there's 3 classes that cause all of the disease and sickness in the world: the Anopheles, the Aedes, and the Culex mosquitoes. And unfortunately, all 3 of those species of those are in large numbers all across Florida. So we have the bad ones. Also, the other 70 plus mosquitoes that don't carry disease, can make your life miserable, as you know. So in Florida mosquito control, we control all of them. And when you look at how, you can say, how hard is it to control mosquitoes? And living in the Florida Keys, I can say that, Florida Keys, we have the Everglades to our north and west, where we can't control. We're a 125-mile long stretch of very fragile, eco-sensitive islands. We have about 50 different species of mosquitoes there. We're surrounded by a marine sanctuary that's governed by both federal and state regulatory agencies. We have about 40 endangered species there, including the key deer. We're a tropical climate, and we're a area of state critical concern. So to control mosquitoes in the Florida Keys and protect the environment, you better know what you're doing. And we do in the Florida Keys. But I look at the rest of the state of Florida, and being on the FMCA board, I know pretty much most of the districts in Florida, and every one of them has a successful story to tell. They have different climates, different amount of rainfall, maybe different temperatures, close to a river or not a river or a lake. But every one of them has a good story that they control mosquitoes pretty well. And nobody controls mosquitoes like Florida in the world, which, we know that as business people, to maximize the output of the macro level, we want to maximize output at all the micro levels. And that's what Florida has done, county by county, maximizing mosquitoes, so that Florida today is number 1 in mosquito control, not only in the United States, but in the world. Like I say, nobody does mosquitoes like Florida does. But when you look at the state and you see the shoreline, you see the climate, it's a paradise for man, but it's also a paradise for mosquitoes. And we all love to live outdoors, so this becomes a problem and makes mosquito control very important. And mosquito control has developed into a very complex science. Every day, our scientists use elements from every physical and life science that you can think of, really high technology, all of our chemicals, from the latest chemical products, chemical engineering technologies, to deliver them using the very low amounts, usually less than 3/4 of an ounce per acre of some of the chemicals that we use, delivered by some of the most modern techniques to precisely put these chemicals where we want them rather than broad spraying like maybe had been done in the past. And also, we use aerial operations a lot, but also unmanned. Drones are becoming more and more used in Florida mosquito control. And another thing that we've done, we've learned to use the full life cycle of mosquitoes to control it. Back in the old days, when the mosquitoes flew, when they were released from the water, they flew and we sprayed for them to kill them. Sometimes it was before they bit you. Sometimes it was after they bit you. But now, what we do is control mosquitoes in the larval stage. About 80% of the mosquitoes that we control are in the larval stage. Once the female mosquito lays the eggs and it goes through about 4 or 5 days of different larval, and then it comes out as mosquito. This is where we're right now controlling about 80% of the mosquitoes in Florida. These are mosquitoes that you never see. So, some of you said you see less mosquitoes now than used to. It's because there's not as many flying. There's as many in the water dead, but that the fish are eating, but no longer that many to bother us. And what has all this done for mosquito control? I can tell you, if you look, we are controlling right now on this graph about 80 to 90% of the mosquitoes. Now, 80 to 90% of the mosquitoes, that sounds good, and it is really good. No one else is doing anything near this in mosquito control. But when you're talking about billions of mosquitoes, 20% or 10%, it's a lot of mosquitoes. So there's still a lot of room for improvement for mosquito control, and we're working hard to get more and more mosquitoes under control. But when you look at this graph, you see this blue X. This marks the time in history in the late 40s till maybe the late 60s where mosquito control was able to eliminate malaria, yellow fever, and dengue fever from the state, and it was also from the nation. And if you look after that, we spent about 30 years to the year 2000 really doing things for quality of life. And we made really good progress on quality of life issues, reducing the number of nuisance mosquitoes. We had the vector mosquitoes were gone in the 50s, then the nuisance mosquitoes. And since the year 2000, with this new technology for larval control, we've allowed Floridians to experience a quality of life they never experienced before. And like I say, it can get better and it will get better, but it's pretty good right now. And it's really the envy of the world. And when you look at what this has done around the same time, if you look at the growth and development of Floridians, going from 1.2 million people who lived here in 1925 to 23 million now. And look where the X is, and you can see that as we improve mosquito control, the population really has grown. Nothing happened really in Florida until these diseases were ended. And you can look also at tourism. The slope of the tourist graph is the same, going from the time we eliminated the diseases. And in the last 24 years, we've doubled the amount of tourists coming into Florida. And with that, 5 or 6 times the amount of money that they spend here. Now, I can say that mosquito control is a big part of that, and it really is. Other things happen too. People came here for our temperature, our climate, for our beaches, for our resorts. But they came back because there was a very good experience from mosquitoes. And we have a 200-year history to prove that when mosquitoes were bad here, people didn't come to Florida. So, we've got room for improvement, but today we are a year-round tourist destination. The property values are very high, good economy. In fact, the brand of Florida is in the world recognized. And Florida is one of the top destinations in the world for tourism. And like I say, we didn't make it happen, but we were a big part of allowing this to happen. It's a prerequisite, more or less. You got to have mosquito control, good mosquito control, before you can have all the other things. But it comes at a cost. Last year, Floridians paid about $330 million, county by county, That was very, less than 1% of this was state money, but it was county ad valorem taxes, $330 million, which is a lot of money. But no matter what metric you look at to compare this to, this is one heck of a good return on investment from a business standpoint and from a quality of life standpoint. And I think we've been very good stewards with the money. We have about 1,000. This way. You know, mosquitoes have helped shape the world for thousands of years. You know, wars were won and lost by which army had the least number of malaria or the most number of malaria or yellow fever diseases. But the real story today is in the tropics and in the subtropical areas here that you see in blue. These are countries that are poor countries, and I've traveled to just about all of them. They're poor countries for the most part. They're undeveloped or developing, and they have been this way for a long time. And the main reason is they have never been able to control the mosquitoes or the diseases, and it's getting worse. But you look at Florida, we're right here where they are, and it's no longer the case for Florida. You know, we're not economically impaired at all because of mosquitoes in the state of Florida because of mosquito control. But like I said, it's not always been this way. In the early 1800s, when Florida was, they were discussing whether they wanted it from Spain or not, and then they got it from Spain. There was a lot of discussion in Congress about what to do with it. Do we want this as a state? And John Randolph, you can't read that from here, but I'll kind of paraphrase. John Randolph, a congressman from Virginia, kind of summed it up. He said, no, we don't want Florida for anything. He said, it's nothing but quagmires, swamps, alligators, mosquitoes, and disease. No man would ever move to Florida, not even from hell itself. And this was kind of the idea of Florida for the next 100 years. You know, the rest of the country was growing, but Florida was not growing. And there was no technology here. You know, people carried, particularly in South Florida, they carried their smudge pots around with them. You know, smoking is a little bit of repellent. That was the main technology. And where I live in the Florida Keys, about 2 miles from my home, actually, on Sugarloaf Key, in the early 1900s, they built the world famous bat tower. This is about a 50-foot structure. They brought bats in from Cuba. And the idea was all these bats are going to eat all these mosquitoes. Well, after about 2 weeks, the bats disappeared. Nobody knows to this day what happened to those bats. One of the most popular stories in the Keys is that the mosquitoes ate them. But nobody really knows. But regardless, it didn't work. It didn't work. And, you know, nothing happened in Florida. Florida did become a state in 1845. Not much happened then again until 1889 when the health department was established in Florida. And it was established because yellow fever and malaria were so bad they had to do something. And Dr. Joseph Porter was the first director of it. He was a well-known Key West physician who had gained a lot of experience with yellow fever and malaria. So he became the first health director. So nothing else happened much, though, as far as mosquito control until 1922. In 1922, there were a group of individuals led by some really powerful women's groups had a big meeting in Daytona Beach and established the Florida Anti-Mosquito Organization, which today is Florida Mosquito Control Association, of which I serve as a board member. And then things started really happening, and they named Dr. Porter as the head of it. So he really energized this. And I might say that there's a lot of good scientists in mosquito control in Florida today. But we stand on the shoulders of some really great giants in mosquito control whose names have really mostly been lost to history. But Dr. Porter is certainly one of those. And things, like I say, things started really moving then. In 1925, the first mosquito control district was established in Indian River. If you know anything about history, Indian River was part of the Indian River Lagoon, which is one of the worst mosquito infested areas in the country. And if you look on the map, from Palm Beach County up to Duval County or Flagler County, it used to be called Mosquito County. If you look on the old map, that's what it said. It was a large area, Mosquito County. And so that was the first one. And then today, and then in 1951, we had more mosquito control districts. And I put stars on these. These are independent special taxing districts, like the Florida Keys Mosquito Control District. Now, there were some other organizations that were more or less county run. The difference being that an independent district is governed by a group of commissioners like myself who are elected for the sole purpose of mosquito control. In a county organization, it's run by the county commission, and they have so many different things to do. As a result, today, most of those are rather small compared to the special districts. And the special districts, you can see in the early days, this was in South Florida where really the bulk of mosquito problems were. And today, and there's a few more, these have become world-class technology centers for mosquito control. If you look back, most of the developments that have happened in mosquito control history have taken place for, by, or with one of those special districts. This is something to be proud of in Florida. This is where our technology center is today. And this ushered in the chemical segment of mosquito control. Before, it was more or less mechanical, where they dug ditches and things. But now we're into the chemicals area of mosquito control. And with that, they eliminated yellow fever, malaria, and dengue fever from Florida, and then it spread to most of the rest of the world. Today, if you look at our mosquito control in Florida, we have a mosquito control unit in every county. The blue ones are the county-run organizations. The red ones are the independent special taxing district, which I said, some of these are really world-class technology centers today. And so this introduced the area of what we call integrated pest management. We went from mechanical to chemical, now to integrated pest management, where we use chemicals for the larval stage, for the adult stage. We look at eliminating sites where mosquitoes are breeding. We look at education. It's a full package of mosquito control today. So quite different. But let's not forget, we are mosquito control, not mosquito extermination. And if you look here, this is scenes that, everything that we have done the last 100 years in mosquito control could be undone quickly and go back to what we were 100 years ago, as well as the disease if it wasn't for mosquito control. One mosquito can be responsible for tens of billions of mosquitoes' descendants in one season in Florida, one summertime. And it's about 6 generations. And in mosquito life, a generation is really every time it rains. So you can go back and look and see how many times it rains in your community. You can see how many generations of mosquitoes you're going to be dealing with. So several weeks without mosquito control, and you'll see what it was like here in the 50s and 60s. Several more weeks, you'll see what it was like in the 20s and 30s. So mosquito control is very important. We do have a good mosquito control in Florida, but there's problems ahead. We were notified by the CDC back in 2018 about the rise of mosquito-borne diseases worldwide. It's really on the increase for a number of reasons. But in Florida and the United States, it's mainly travel related, because increased world travel coming into Florida particularly is causing these diseases to increase. And the CDC said Florida is ground zero. They also said that only about 20% of the mosquito control operations in the whole country were technically competent enough to ward against this increased threat. Now, I can tell you that 20% was well represented here in Florida. This was kind of our clarion call here. And since then, I think every mosquito control district in Florida is equally prepared to go after the nuisance and after the disease control. So we've come a long way in this. But the diseases did come. You can see here, like last year, 2024 was the worst year Florida had for mosquito-borne diseases in decades. And if you look in the north there, West Nile virus, Eastern equine encephalitis, St. Louis encephalitis, these are diseases that start in birds, and birds are bitten by mosquitoes, and then it's transferred to man. There was a lot of evidence in birds this year. The only one that had man was West Nile virus, and there were about 19 people in Florida that infected with West Nile virus. And this is a horrible disease. These diseases are terrible, and once you get them, you can have neurological problems for the rest of your life. But also, remember Zika in Miami-Dade several years ago, 10 years ago, and how bad it was on the economy. And scientists and medical researchers told us then that there were about 20 other mosquito-borne diseases that you've never heard of, just like we had never heard of Zika, that had been identified and could show up at any time. Well, this past year, one new one did show up. Oropouche virus showed up mainly in Miami, mainly coming from Cuba. There were about 100 travel-related cases in Miami this past year, thousands upon thousands in Cuba and other South American, Central American countries and Caribbean nations. So we're really on the lookout for what may happen to that next year. A lot of the West Nile virus, we think this was exacerbated this last year because of hurricanes. You know, the hurricanes, there were several of them, affected the West Coast particularly. And this interrupted the migratory pattern of birds. So birds stayed here longer, maybe more chance. Also, there was hundreds of thousands of acres underwater for this time from the hurricanes that also exacerbated the mosquito problems. But the two main ones that we are concerned with and the Department of Health is concerned with is malaria and dengue. Malaria was about 100 cases of travel-related this past year in Florida. The year before, we had the first local transmission of malaria in over 20 years. And dengue fever for the last 2 years set records in Florida for the worst cases of dengue fever in the last 60, 70 years. About 1,000 cases in Florida the last 2 years, mostly in the South, a lot of it in Miami-Dade, with also a lot of local transmission as well. It used to be in mosquito control when we made a mistake, and we have made mistakes. Or areas where we couldn't spray for various reasons, and people got mad. But now, people can get sick, can get very sick. So I can tell you that this is a very serious problem. People at Mosquito Control take this new public health dimension that we are responsible for very seriously. And, if it's coming in from all these nations, it's a global problem. It should be a global solution. And I can tell you there's a lot of effort going on right now in the tropics for mosquito control, big organizations in there, but the progress is very slow and it's very expensive. So if we're going to solve the problem here in Florida, we have to solve it. It has to be a Florida solution. And I can tell you that we're working hard on that. And one of the best examples is what we're doing in the Florida Keys. And this transfers into a new area of biopesticides. And a little background on that, the main mosquito that we have in the Florida Keys that carries disease is the Aedes aegypti. It was one of the three that I mentioned early on. And it's growing in number. You can see in red where it is right now, and it's continuing to move north. There's reports of it in New York also. So it carries yellow fever, dengue fever, chikungunya, and Zika. But in the Florida Keys today, we are most concerned with dengue fever, which is a terrible disease. It goes from flu-like symptoms that may take a couple of weeks to what's called break bone fever, where you feel like your body is just breaking apart. And you can develop also hemorrhagic fever, which increases the mortality of it. And you can see the growth here from on the left from the 1980s when just a small amount. This is just in the Americas. You can see how it's grown. And where this area is here, that blue line there represents half a year in 2023. And so, so that number was much higher. 2024 was also much higher. So we're already off the graph. There were over 100 million cases in the world of dengue fever last year. And it's grown so that particularly in South and Central America, almost every country there, this disease is endemic. And before 1970, there were only like 9 countries where it was endemic. Today, there's over 100, and it's still growing. So it's a really important disease to control. And like I say, people are coming in, and they're coming in really from our gateway airports and also our cruise ships, people coming in. For instance, in Miami alone, there's about 8 or 9 jumbo jets a day coming in from Brazil alone. Brazil last year had about 14 million cases of dengue fever and about 4,000 deaths. So people are coming in, and how it works is, let's say if you're in Brazil and you get bitten by an Aedes aegypti mosquito that's infected, you get infected, you get on an airplane to come to somewhere in Florida for vacation. You don't know you're infected, because there's an incubation period there of a few days. So you get off and you get bitten in Florida by one of our Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, which we have here. And they're very difficult to control because of where they live and how they live. They prefer human blood to make their eggs. Rather, most mosquitoes, they'll bite a chicken or a bird or an iguana or something. But the Aedes aegypti likes human blood. So this guy gets off the airplane, he gets bitten by one of our mosquitoes, and he is actually infected. He's brought dengue fever into Florida. And, one mosquito can infect 10 to 20 people a day. That mosquito bites another person, another mosquito bites that person, and it spreads. And before long, you have an epidemic on your hands. And this is what we're trying to avoid, because and I can tell you, it's much easier to prevent this through preventive measures than it is to end this once it starts locally spreading. Two important things too, is that only female mosquitoes bite. Male mosquitoes don't bite. They just go out and feed on nectar and look for female mosquitoes to mate. That's really their job. The female mosquitoes are the ones that bite, and only old female mosquitoes carry disease, because there's an incubation period of time before this disease manifests in their bodies. And and that's really an important point, which has helped Florida a lot, because with our robust mosquito control, it's really a challenge for a mosquito to die of old age in Florida, but it does happen. And when it happens, we have the chance for disease. But that doesn't help us as much as we'd like in Florida to control disease, because this Aedes aegypti mosquito, it is the only ways to control the virus. There's no vaccines, there's no therapeutic treatment for it. So the only way to control the virus is to control the mosquito. And unfortunately, the better pesticides that we've used and been using for this is no longer very effective. It's becoming resistant to it. So we need new technology, desperately need new technology. But fortunately, there again, we're in the middle of a technology boom in mosquito control. I get letters pretty regularly from research institutions, from leading universities research, a lot of them here in Florida, medical research, about the research they're doing mainly for biopesticides, genetic engineering of mosquitoes. This is mosquitoes killing mosquitoes without the use of pesticide. Now, there's a public relations aspect to that we'll talk about in a minute, but a lot of these new developments, they're years away, because it takes a long time going through the EPA process and other regulatory process to get these new technologies certified. But we do have 3 technologies that are going to be very important to mosquito control. And this is called the sterile insect technique, SIT for short. And there's 3 ways to impart sterility to mosquitoes today. The first one is what you see there, Wolbachia, which is a bacteria that's impregnated into the mosquito, and it makes it sterile in effect. This was pioneered by the University of Kentucky and their company Mosquito Mate. The next is radiation, where you irradiate the mosquitoes to make them sterile. And this was pioneered by the International Atomic Energy Agency. and perfected for mosquitoes by Lee County Mosquito Control, one of the real fine technology centers that I mentioned. They are really a leader in this and doing very well with it. Still experimenting, still working with it, but expanding it. The last one you see is the one that was really most interesting for us in the Florida Keys, genetic engineering, and this was developed around 2000 by Oxford University in England. And Oxitec, their promoting bioscience company, is now American owned, Oxitec, and they're one of the leading bioscience companies in the world. And we're interested in all three of these technologies. We think there's room for all three of these technologies in the world. And how the SIT works, you release on the left here, you see a male that is sterile. Regardless of which process, it mates with a wild female and there's no offspring. So you continue to do this for a while and you see the population dropping. And let's say we're interested mainly in the Oxitec, but we're interested in all of them as well. And the EPA has found that all three of these are safe, they're effective. And so what we did, we were fortunate enough working with Oxitec and the EPA to be able to get a 3-year experimental use permit to release these genetically modified mosquitoes in the Florida Keys. And so for 3 years, we released about 12 million of these mosquitoes through a very controlled experimental use permit from the EPA, very regulated. Also, the Department of Agriculture was right there looking at. Also, we did hundreds of thousands of research tests, also sampling, and all this data was collected and sent to the EPA. And this was 100% funded by Oxitec. Not one penny of local taxpayer money funded this because this is something that could be really big worldwide. And so what we found after all this study, we saw that, and this is a graph of what we actually achieved, starting out with 100% of the Aedes aegypti population in that area. After a short time releasing these mosquitoes, you could see these numbers really starting to go down. And within a few months, we had eliminated more than 90% of the Aedes aegypti mosquito. And this was unheard of. And this is a really unique technology. The irradiated mosquito and the Wolbachia, they require releasing adults mosquitoes. So somebody has to raise these millions of adult mosquitoes, ship them to you. So it's rather expensive, labor intensive, but it works. Oxitec used to be that way, but they came out with a new technology where we release from eggs. And it's pretty simple. They provide a box like this, hundreds of boxes like this, and this thing is locked up on me. And you go by every week, you put in a little packet of eggs that they supply, and look, in a shoebox full of eggs, these egg packets, you've got a year's supply for the Florida Keys. So we can keep an inventory. Whereas with the ones we have to bring in the adult males, we have to ship them in and they've got a very limited lifespan. So this thing is really long-term sustainable, we think. So you put your eggs in there and you fill it full of water, you close it up, and within a week, all of those eggs hatch, mosquitoes are released by nature. Nobody has to raise them. Because I've seen some of these factories where they're growing some of these mosquitoes in for some of the other projects, and it looks like Costco. I mean, it's a huge operation, you know, but this is all done right here in this one little box. And I can tell you, if everybody in the Florida Keys had one of these boxes and they went out once a week, opened it up, put the eggs in there, filled it up full of water and closed it back, within one season, we would have no Aedes aegypti in the Florida Keys and we wouldn't have to worry about mosquito-borne diseases. So this is our goal long-term. But unfortunately, you know, the EPA, when we did all this testing, they told us that it would take up to 2 years before they were able to give really commercial authorization. And it's been 1.5 years now. We talked to them recently. It looks like, you know, by the end of this year, they'll be able to certify it. So things really move slowly. And we've been working on this thing since 2010. So nobody can say we really rushed into this. And what we're hoping is this blue area is how we're controlling them now. we're controlling 50 to 60% of the Aedes aegypti mosquito. And like I said, and 90% of the other mosquitoes we're controlling. So we're not doing as well on this one, but we're hoping that this sterile insect technique will bridge this gap so that we can control, more than 90% and end the problems that we're having in the Florida Keys. But, anytime that you do this, when you talk to your community about releasing irradiated mosquitoes or mosquitoes that have a new bacteria in them, or better yet, genetically modified mosquitoes, you better be ready to educate the community on what's going on. And we did. We had several years where we ran a lot of town hall meetings. We had experts come in and talk. And we did have some opposition that were pretty vocal, smaller groups. But we did have a referendum in 2016, and 58% of the Florida Keys voted in favor of it. So I don't know if you know anything about politics in the Florida Keys. Nobody gets elected with 58% of the vote down there. So this was really a landslide. And so we have the community backing to do this. And we also, the Florida is going to continue to be the leader in mosquito control development. And, it's going to cost money, like we said. We don't think it's going to cost much more money because we spend a lot of money now on chemicals that we maybe will be able to reduce. But regardless, it's going to be a very good value. But it's something that we have to do every day. We have to keep at it every day, developing new technologies, getting better. And it's just like Dr. Porter said at his farewell address to the Florida Anti-Mosquito Association. Keep everlastingly at it. This was our mantra then, and it is now. He knew very well that the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, doesn't apply to mosquito control. Mosquito control in Florida is certainly not broken, but we have to fix it every day. Our scientists and technicians are in the field every day, reacting to new situations to keep our residents and our visitors comfortable and safe, and to keep our economy booming. Because at Florida Mosquito Control, that's what we do. And now you know. And thank you very much for your attention. If I have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer. Yes, sir.
How long does a mosquito live, number one? And then, is there anything I can eat or drink that make me less attractive?
There are, but there's, as far as eating or drinking, the bigger the person is, the more carbon dioxide they give off, which is one of the problems. Somebody says we got mosquito problem, and we send a skinny guy out there to do it. He doesn't find any mosquitoes. We send a bigger guy out there, and he does. So, but as far as how long does a mosquito live, a female mosquito can live 3 to 4 weeks. A male mosquito only lives 3 or 4 days. So, a female mosquito, a male mosquito during that time can mate many times, but a female mosquito only mates once. So this is one of the real keys to this this technology, because you keep releasing these these males that are sterile, and the population can come down quickly. Yes, sir.
Yeah, first of all, I want to congratulate you on a tremendous thing, and also to tell you that my father was an agronomist professor at NC State, and I'm an honorary graduate of.
Oh, really? Okay.
Both institutions. One of the things that's going on outside the United States is Google committed to introduce the sterile males worldwide, and they came up with a very elaborate way to deliver that. I won't get into that. Has that affected? I mean, you do it with the organization that started in London. Is that a viable way, given the life cycle of a mosquito?
Yes, yes. And there's several ways, and there's a lot of new ways that are being developed now. And all of them, to me, look very good. They follow some of the same, technology as far as, the mosquito itself. But there's a lot of different ways to make these, to rear the mosquitoes. And this is one of the things they're doing, being able to rear them quickly and sort them, because you can only use male mosquitoes. They have to sort out the female mosquitoes. So some of the real electronics that Google has come up with has been really fantastic for both the irradiated and the Wolbachia technology. So, and there's more and more of this coming along. So that's a fantastic technology. Yes, sir.
On the biological control, once she mates with the sterile male, even though she's not fertile, is she no longer looking to mate with another male? And is she no longer attracted to males to try to mate with her? And then also, I give blood a lot, is there a period where a blood donation is able to pass that on to the recipient?
To pass
If you were to be infected with it.
for the dengue, yes. You know, to pass it along, you know, once the mosquito has bitten someone who's infected, it takes several days, 4 or 5 days maybe, before that virus matures, you know, in their body, so that when they bite somebody, you know, when they bite to take a blood meal, that's what they do. The females do. They take the blood meal and they infect that person, and then that person's got an incubation period of a few days before they get sick. Now the mosquitoes. Your first part of your question was,
Well, are they able, if they give a blood donation during that incubation period, are they able to pass that on? Then the other question was,
yes,
once they make the sterile male,
the number.
they're not literally fertile with that, but are they still looking to mate, or do they think, have they satisfied that need?
You know, the males mate many times. Females mate only once for the Aedes aegypti, but when they mate, but they can lay multiple egg batches from that one mating. So that's what happens. So this is one thing. Once she's mated, she doesn't really go out to look mate, but she lay her eggs at about maybe three or 2 or 3 different times throughout her life cycle. So one mating with a sterile male just really neutralizes all of those offspring. Yes, sir. You know, it's an interesting thing. I don't think anything's been done with love bugs, but Oxitec, you know, they are a real biotechnology company, and they are looking at using the same technology in a lot of agricultural pests, you know, that destroy a lot of crops. A lot of work's being done all over the world with that. And they're also using the same technology, and they're in Africa right now, where the main malaria diseases are locally transmitting, using that same technology, testing it out in Africa to see if they can stay ahead of the malaria. So a lot of work's being done. I'm not sure about, I think we're going to continue to control it with hitting our windshields. Yes, sir.
Will it make much of a difference?
Yes, you know, drones are a big, important part today, and even more in the future. And there are still some regulations that the federal government, FAA, has that makes it a little bit difficult for mosquito control organizations, because we have to maintain a line of sight of that, and you know, for that drone. But you know, we're able to use drones for surveillance, finding out where mosquitoes are. There's some real sophisticated cameras in these things now. We also use them for mapping, to map where the mosquitoes are, so that we can translate this to our aircraft so that they can, you know, spray in the same area. And there's also drones now that we use actually to deliver chemical system in hard to reach areas. So they're really growing a lot. They're affordable, particularly for smaller districts that maybe, you know, we have a full fleet of aircraft in the Florida Keys. So, you know, we can, but we still use drones as well. Lee County has a lot of aircraft, but they have a lot of drones too. There's a lot of places where this technology really fits, and it's going to be more important as we go forward. Yes, sir.
So, someone who fortunately had malaria twice.
Oh.
Thank you very much. But my question is around chemicals that are being used. Are there any effects on other wildlife that feed on mosquitoes or that live in the environment?
Yeah, the answer is, for some of them there are. For a lot of them, they're not. They're pretty target specific. But for some of the pesticides for adults, they do. You know, they're mainly for mosquitoes, but they can also impact smaller insects. And you know, what we do whenever, you know, honeybees are very important to all of us. So we know all of the beekeepers in the Florida Keys, and I think this is similar all throughout Florida. You know where the beekeepers are. They're registered. On the day that we're going to be spraying something that will impact them, we call all the beekeepers. They go out and cover all their hives with wet burlap. We fly over and then we tell them when we've flown over, they uncover and there's no damage to them. But otherwise, well, we do kill bees, but it's usually the wild bees that are, nobody is controlling, that are built in a hollow tree somewhere. And but that's the main thing. But there are, with other smaller insects, there's still some chemicals that we use that do impact them. But we try very hard to not. But as far as birds and other things, most of our products, only a very few insects are sensitive to them. The lady in the back.
But we would regularly go down to the sour, which is the seafood on the Red Sea. And then we went down and we got and shop for everything you could ever imagine. But when we go down to the sour, the seafood on the Red Sea, we always had to take anti-malaria pill. So that kind of medication, I mean, this was fascinating. But are those kinds of medications still available, or do they have any effect on the body that kind of gives you any?
There are some anti-malaria pills. They're not 100% effective though, but they still, that's the best thing we have today. They do have vaccines for yellow fever, but there's a shortage of it worldwide. How many in here have been vaccinated for yellow fever? And so, if we had an outbreak, it would be a real problem with yellow fever. And yellow fever is not off the books yet either. But this is one of the problems for dengue fever. There are no vaccines for this. They're working on it. They've got some that work it has a very low efficiency rate. They're giving them to kids, in South America where it's really prone, where they have a lot of death. So if you can improve that, reduce that by 10, 15, 20%, it helps. But really nothing for the U.S. market at this time. But they are working on it. So hopefully in the future. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yes, ma'am. I have to think about that one for a minute, but no, but I would say no. As a mosquito control guy, I would say no. However, it's part of the food chain. And like I say, we're not mosquito exterminating. Nobody, at least we would not be allowed to exterminate all the mosquitoes in the world because they're part of the food chain. But I tell you, you could eliminate all of them in Florida. And I don't think, the birds that eat them would find something else to eat, I think.
We have run out of time. Please join me in thanking Mr. Goodman for his time.
Thank you very much.
As a token of our appreciation from the club, we'd like to give you this space.
Thank you.
If you please be on the lookout for email from us for the next 2 speaker series, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you.